If anyone ever said, on your first day at work, all you need is calm and a smile, they clearly had never witnessed Clara Jensen walk into Lowell Global on that fateful morning. The New York sky was gray, a fine drizzle clinging to the air, and Clara, dressed in a bargain bin blazer from a discount store, kept telling herself today would be a new beginning. A stable job, a gleaming office, polite colleagues. After months of juggling part-time work, this was her chance to finally prove herself, only she had no idea that she was about to make an impression in the most literal sense. The glass revolving door in the main lobby seemed to have a vendetta against her. Before she could step through, the strap of her purse got caught between two panels. In one hand, she held a steaming cup of coffee. In the other, the heel of her flats, already loose from yesterday's, nagged on the carpet and then hump. A sudden push sent her shooting out of the door like a human slingshot, staggering across the lobby, scattering coffee, papers, and every shred of dignity she had left. The crash echoed through the hall, drawing curious stares from the security guard and from Marian, the seasoned receptionist. Arms crossed, Marian smirked as if she had just watched a free comedy show. Quite the grand entrance, Clara muttered under her breath, cheeks blazing as she bent to gather coffee-soaked papers. Marian sauntered closer, her tone half teasing, half sneering. So you're the new receptionist. Didn't know entertainment was part of the job description? Clara forced a smile, tucking the damp files back into her bag. Just a little mishap. It won't happen again. Finally settling into her chair, she exhaled dullly for the seat to groan ominously beneath her. Even the key card refused to cooperate, forcing her to swipe it 3 times before it lit up. Everything around her seemed to whisper the same cruel reminder. Clara Jensen, you don't belong in a place like this. She closed her eyes, adjusted her glasses, and tried to look composed. I'll be fine. Just stay quiet, do your work, and no more disasters. But fate had other plans. A sharply dressed man approached the reception desk. His hair was neatly combed, his demeanor serious. Unlike most visitors, he didn't speak. Instead, his hands began to move in familiar gestures. Marian arched an eyebrow and let out a derisive laugh. Sir, I have no idea what kind of waving you're doing, but this is a reception desk, not a talent show. Silence fell. The man stopped, disappointment flickering across his eyes. Clara shot up from her chair, heart pounding as childhood memories rushed back. Afternoons spent with her grandmother, practicing clumsy signs. Her grandmother's laughter when little Clara tried to sign I love you with tiny, awkward hands. She hadn't used it in years, but her body still remembered. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Her fingers trembled, but her will was steady. Hello, how may I help you? Clara signed, her soft voice accompanying the movement. The man's face lit up instantly. A bright smile spread, gratitude shining in his eyes. His hands moved in a swift reply. Clara translated aloud for Marian, whose smirk had evaporated into embarrassed silence. He says he has a meeting with the partnerships division, arrived a bit early, and would like to confirm the contact person. I'll look it up. The entire lobby seemed to pause, watching in astonishment. Clara's signing was hesitant, but sincere. That was enough to bridge the gap. The man bowed his thanks several times before leaving behind a hush of awe and shame for those who had mocked him moments before. Clara returned to her desk, cheeks warm but heart unexpectedly light. At least her grandmother would be proud. What she didn't know was that upstairs, near the private executive elevator, a pair of eyes had been watching the whole exchange. Adrian Lowell, the notoriously cold CEO, stood there, the faintest curve tugging at his lips, something his employees rarely, if ever, saw. Back in his glass-walled office, Adrian sat down, fingers steepled. Will, he said to his assistant, his gaze still fixed on the Manhattan skyline, I want a full report on the new receptionist. Name, education, background, and especially where she learned sign language. Down at the front desk, Clara was still dabbing coffee stains from her blouse, consoling herself with the thought that at least half of her first day was over. She had no idea that this single moment had set in motion a turning point, one that would change her life in ways she could never imagine. On her second day at Lowell Global, Clara Jensen made herself a promise. Today, no disasters in the lobby restroom mirror. She adjusted her slightly crooked glasses, smoothed the messy brown hair left untamed by a rushed morning, and tugged at her bargain blazer. It looked even more wrinkled than yesterday, but at least it was free of coffee stains. "Calm down, Clara," she whispered. "All you need to do is smile, answer phones, jot down appointments. You can do this." The promise lasted exactly 3 hours and 41 minutes. It all began with the coffee machine at the reception counter. "Broken again," Marion grumbled, smacking the side of the machine until water dripped onto the floor. "If anyone wants real coffee, they'll have to go up to the 10th floor. In a desperate attempt to be helpful, Clara piped up, "I can go get some for you." "I need to learn the floors anyway." Marion arched a brow, arms folded. "You? Going up to the management level? People up there are worth more than my old car. Do you even know how to bow properly?" Clara gave an awkward laugh. "I won't make a fool of myself. It's just coffee." 15 minutes later, she stood in the executive elevator clutching a tray of 4 steaming cups. Her palms were slick with sweat. She told herself she was doing the simplest task in the world: bring coffee back down to the lobby. What could possibly go wrong? The answer arrived when the elevator stopped on the 12th floor. The doors slid open, and in stepped a tall man in a perfectly tailored dark suit. His black hair was neatly combed, his presence so commanding it seemed to shrink the space around him. He didn't glance at Clara, pressed the button for the lobby, and scrolled through his phone. Clara shifted to give him space, forgetting she held the coffee tray. Her elbow knocked against the wall, the tray jolted, and suddenly the world slowed to a nightmare in motion. 4 cups of coffee went flying. 1 shattered on the floor, splattering the mirrored walls. Another tipped straight onto the control panel, making the buttons flicker wildly. A third splashed across her own shoe, searing hot. And the last, the cruelest of all, poured directly over the man's gleaming Italian leather shoes. Clara froze. Then instinct kicked in. She dropped to her knees, frantically dabbing with tissues. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. Aurora, I'll buy you a new pair, though I'm sure they cost more than my rent." Her heart thudded wildly, bracing for a scolding. But instead, laughter filled the cramped space, a warm, unexpected laugh that made her look up. The man was watching her, amusement glinting in his eyes. "They're just shoes," he said, his voice deep but relaxed. "They used to be expensive. Now they come with free coffee." Clara blinked. "You're not angry?" "No. I'm just trying to decide whether to call this a mobile cafe or modern art on leather." Despite herself, she laughed, cheeks burning. "You're far too kind. Meanwhile, I'm a walking disaster. Yesterday I got catapulted out of the revolving door like a drunk pigeon. Today I turned the elevator into a coffee shop. Tomorrow I'll probably set the office on fire." The man laughed harder. "I'm Adrian. It's a pleasure to meet you." He held out his hand. Clara hesitated before shaking it, her fingers still sticky with coffee. "Clara Jensen, rookie chaos generator. And very sorry about your shoes. Making me laugh matters more than a pair of shoes." Adrian replied simply. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. He stepped out first, but turned back with a smile. "I'm sure we'll see each other again, Clara." She stood frozen, staring after him as he disappeared down the executive hall. One thought echoed in her head. Something strange, a man in a designer suit. shoes soaked in coffee, and he still laughed. Back at the desk, Marian eyed Clara's stained clothes. "Where's the coffee?" "You look like you just wrestled an espresso machine." Clara sighed, blotting at her blazer. "Long story. But I met someone interesting." Marian narrowed her eyes. "Interesting how?" "The kind of interesting that sues you for ruining Italian shoes." Clara's mind replayed the man's smile, his laugh echoing in her ears. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, the kind that laughs with me." What she didn't know was that this interesting man wasn't just another high-ranking executive. Adrian Lowell was the CEO of the entire corporation. And that rare smile of his was about to change her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. The next morning, Clara Jensen swore she would become the perfect invisible employee. She woke an hour earlier, ironed her only white blouse until it was crisp, polished her scuffed flats, and decided to give up coffee entirely. No coffee meant no stains, she told herself, recalling the lingering aroma on those Italian leather shoes from the day before at the reception desk. Everything ran so smoothly it felt suspicious. No angry visitors, no revolving doors catching her purse, no paper cups tumbling to the floor. Clara even managed to answer 3 calls and schedule appointments without a single error. "Well, look at you, actually doing your job today," Marian remarked, her sarcasm as sharp as ever. Clara simply smiled, refusing to rise to the bait. Quiet was good enough. But quiet didn't last past noon. A tall figure entered the lobby, making the security guard straighten instantly, and even Marian stopped typing mid-sentence. Clara looked up, and her pulse skipped. Adrian Lowell. His gray suit fit with effortless perfection, his dark hair neatly styled, his face cold and distant from the world around him. He strode directly to the reception desk. "Clara Jensen." His deep voice carried. She shot to her feet, flustered. "Why, yes, that's me." "The shoes I mean sorry again about yesterday." The faintest curve touched Adrian's lips. "My shoes survived. I want to discuss something else." "Come up to my office." Marian's jaw dropped. Whispers rippled through the staff nearby. Clara felt like a schoolgirl summoned to the principal's office. "Ah, yes." The elevator whisked them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Clara's breath caught. His office was as large as her entire apartment, polished wood floors, walls of glass pouring in the Manhattan skyline, abstract paintings that could pay her rent for years. The air smelled of mahogany and expensive coffee. "Sit." Adrian gestured. Clara sank into a leather chair so soft she feared she might vanish into it. She placed her bag carefully on the floor, gripping her skirt for composure. Adrian leaned forward, hands steepled. "I want to talk about what happened the other day." With the deaf gentleman in the lobby, Clara flushed. "Oh, I just helped. My grandmother was deaf, so I know some sign language." "Just helped," Adrian repeated, eyes steady. "Do you realize how different that was? You didn't stare. You didn't make a spectacle. You simply communicated naturally, as if it were the most ordinary thing." Her cheeks burned hotter. "I never thought of it that way. To me, sign language is just another language." Adrian leaned back, silent for a moment. Then his words knocked the air right out of her. "I want you to lead a new project." Clara blinked. I'm sorry. What?" "A project on inclusion. Not only ramps and elevators, but training staff in communication, creating a workplace where the deaf or disabled feel heard." His gaze stayed locked on hers. "And I want you to lead it." Clara gave a shaky laugh. "Me? I'm just a temp receptionist, known for getting flung out of revolving doors and turning elevators into coffee shops." Adrian chuckled, a rare sound. "Warming the room. Yes, but even through that chaos, you chose to stand up and help. That's what I need." Clara swallowed hard. I don't know anything about managing projects. I don't have fancy degrees. I can barely use the key card properly. I already have people for budgets, logistics, paperwork. What I need is sincerity, heart, the things you can't buy. His voice was calm. Deliberate, she glanced at her ink-smudged hands, still showing the marks of rushed note-taking. In her mind rose the memory of her grandmother Rose, who once told her, "Clara, never see our language as lesser. It's as beautiful and powerful as any other." Clara looked up. "Why does this matter so much to you?" For a moment, his expression faltered. He drew in a breath. "My sister, Elise, was born deaf. My family hid it, treated it like shame. She grew up in silence, without anyone truly listening. By the time I was old enough to help, it was already too late in many ways." Clara's chest tightened. "How is she now?" "She's fine. A doctor in Seattle, with a family. But the memory of those years when she was ignored still haunts me. I can't let that happen to others." The room went quiet, save for the wind brushing the glass walls. Clara felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her. "I still don't think I'm good enough," she whispered. "But if you really need someone, I'll try." Adrian's eyes softened, lighting with resolve. "Good. We'll start with sign language lessons. I want every executive here to know at least the basics. And I want you to teach me first." Her eyes widened. "Me? Teach you?" "Yes, I tend to learn quickly. But if my expressions are wrong, I expect you to correct me." Directly, Clara laughed, for the first time glimpsing a crack in his icy exterior. "You'll regret saying that." "I'm known to be a tough teacher." Adrian tilted his head, the faintest warmth in his eyes. "I hope so." Clara bit her lip, realizing her heart was pounding faster than usual. She didn't know if this was the beginning of a great mistake or the start of something extraordinary. But one thing was certain. From today onward, her life would never be the same. The 18th floor boardroom, usually reserved for tense negotiations, had been transformed into Adrian Lowell's first sign language classroom. Clara Jensen stood at the whiteboard, marker trembling slightly in her hand. Across from her, Adrian sat with one leg crossed, his tailored suit impeccable, a Mont Blanc pen neatly placed beside his notepad. Looking at him, Clara couldn't help but think he seemed more prepared to pitch to shareholders than to learn the alphabet. "We'll start with letters," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "For example, this is the letter A." She raised her hand. Thumb pressed against the side of her index finger. The rest curled in. Adrian tilted his head, studied carefully, then copied her. Only instead of the letter A, his hand looked more like a clenched fist ready for a boxing match. "Ah, it's not for fighting," Clara chuckled. Stepping closer, "The thumb goes on the side. Like this." She gently adjusted his hand. For a fleeting second, the distance between them shrank. Clara caught the faint trace of mint on the man once described as ice cold. Her cheeks burned as she quickly pulled back. "Like this." Adrian tried again. "Yes. Perfect." Now, this is B. The lesson continued, though it soon resembled more comedy than instruction. Adrian, the sharp CEO who could negotiate billion-dollar contracts, fumbled with awkward finger shapes. His F looked like an oversized OK sign, his K like someone hailing a cab. Clara couldn't hold back her laughter. "Are you sure you usually learn things quickly?" Adrian arched an eyebrow, trying not to smile. "I've never had a teacher this strict before. Maybe it's the pressure." "Oh, I'm the one under pressure." "You're the one making me sweat bullets." They laughed together, the sound echoing through a room more accustomed to stern debates. At the end of the session, Adrian gathered his notes. "Tomorrow, I want to learn how to say good morning and thank you so I can use them with our deaf employees in the service division." Clara blinked in surprise. "You actually plan to use it right away?" Yes, if this is just for show, it's no different from hanging a slogan on the wall. I want people to know it matters. His words made Clara pause. For the first time, she saw not just the cold CEO, but the older brother haunted by guilt for not protecting his sister. And she realized it was that guilt that drove him to change in the days that followed. Their sign language class became their little secret. Each lunch break, Adrian appeared in the boardroom. Clara taught him greetings, questions, even silly phrases like, "What's for lunch?" or "Careful, hot coffee." One afternoon, Adrian tried to sign the latter, but got it wrong. Clara burst out laughing, convinced he'd said iced coffee. The tragedy of a CEO, she gasped between laughs, trying to warn staff but accidentally ordering Starbucks. Even Adrian laughed, looking years younger. Another time, Clara brought handmade flashcards colored paper with her uneven handwriting. Adrian studied them quietly, then arranged them neatly on the table as though they were priceless documents. "You always over-prepare," he observed. "Not really," Clara shrugged. "I just worry I'm not good enough." Having something to hold on to helps. Adrian's gaze softened. "You are good enough. More than enough." The simple words rattled her. She ducked her head, pretending to organize papers. But her heartbeat betrayed her calm. One afternoon, as the lesson ended, Adrian spoke unexpectedly. "At least my sister once told me the most painful thing wasn't being unable to hear. It was that no one tried to listen." I think she was right. Clara sat still. Memories of her grandmother flooding back her patient smile, her gentle corrections when Clara signed clumsily as a child. Trying such a simple word, yet powerful enough to bridge worlds. "You know," Clara said softly, "the deaf don't need pity. They just want to be part of the conversation." Adrian nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "And that's exactly what you did that day in the lobby. You don't realize how much you changed the way I see things." Silence fell again. Outside, the sunset poured through the glass walls, bathing the room in golden orange. For a moment, the distance between a cold CEO and a clumsy receptionist dissolved completely. That evening, back in her tiny apartment, Clara sat in her worn chair, laptop open as she searched for more sign language materials to prepare for the next day's lesson. The screen blurred through tears she couldn't explain. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe the fragile glimmer of hope that had sparked inside a heart used to loneliness. She whispered to herself, "Don't dream. Clara, he's the CEO, and you're just the temp receptionist." But Adrian's warm laughter, his fumbling attempts at signs, and the sincerity in his eyes when he spoke of his sister lingered in her mind, refusing to fade. That day, Lowell Global buzzed with unusual activity. A fleet of luxury cars lined up outside the lobby. Reporters stood waiting. Clara Jensen kept busy at the front desk, her heart thumping as she overheard whispers of an important event. "Don't mess up like last time," Marion sneered. Her lips painted a blazing red. "The elite of the elite are here today. One slip up and you'll be off the payroll." Clara pressed her lips together, forcing herself to focus on every polite greeting. She had no idea that among the distinguished guests walking in was someone who would append everything. Vivian Cross appeared as if stepping straight out of a fashion magazine, golden hair cascading, a turquoise bodycon dress hugging her frame, eyes sharp with confidence and just enough arrogance to sting. At her side was Daniel Ladrian's younger brother. Their hands intertwined, their smiles fixed perfectly for the flashing cameras. Clara froze for a moment when she saw them. She didn't know much about Daniel, only the rumors that he lived a reckless life, so unlike Adrian's discipline. But it was Vivian who held her gaze. Something about the woman's presence made Clara feel small without a word being spoken. When their eyes met, Vivian's lips curved into a cold smile, as if dissecting her. "Hello, may I help you?" Clara asked, summoning her courage. "Oh," Vivian drawled. "You must be the new receptionist Adrian has taken such an interest in, HM?" Clara stiffened. "I just worked the front desk." "How adorable," Vivian murmured, turning to Daniel. "See, darling? Adrian always did have peculiar tastes. Anyway, let's head upstairs." They walked past, leaving Clara rooted in place, her chest heavy. That afternoon, delivering documents to the 18th floor, Clara paused when she heard a familiar voice slip through a cracked door. Vivian's tone was unmistakable, sharp, poised, cruelly clear. "Adrian, you haven't changed. Always playing hero for the underlings. That receptionist, don't tell me you're actually serious about her." Clara froze, her feet cemented to the floor. Adrian's reply was firm, his voice low. "Vivian, whatever we had is over. Who I care about now is none of your concern." "Oh, but what about Daniel?" Vivian's laugh rang out, cutting. "He's your brother. Soon I'll be your sister-in-law. If that girl truly thinks she can worm her way into the Lowell family, she's more naive than I imagined." Clara set the documents down on a side table, her hands trembling. Each word felt like a blade carving into her chest. She turned away, heartbeat roaring in her ears. The next morning, rumors spread like wildfire. The new receptionist is using Adrian Lowell to climb the ladder. Anonymous emails circulated to HR, accusing Clara of scheming to get close to the CEO and showing off with sign language to gain attention. The head of HR summoned her. A neat stack of printed accusations sat on his desk. "We've received some concerning feedback," he said, his tone polite yet cold. "Would you care to explain?" Clara's throat went dry. I've only been doing my job. I learned sign language from my grandmother. I never. Perhaps it's best if you take a leave of absence. Until this situation cools down." The words hollowed her out. A leave of absence meant surrendering, as though admitting guilt. But staying meant facing suspicion. Marion's barbs, Vivian's icy smile. When she stepped out, Adrian was there. One look at her shaken face, and he stopped her. "Clara, what happened?" She bit her lip, fighting tears. "Nothing. Just realizing I don't belong here." Adrian's brow furrowed. "If someone said something, I'll handle it." "No," Clara cut in, her voice trembling. "You can't keep fixing things for me. I need to know when to walk away." His eyes flashed with frustration, with helplessness. But Clara had already turned, hurrying toward the elevator. That evening, in her tiny apartment, she sat at the worn table, folding her receptionist uniform into a bag. Outside, the city lights glittered, but inside her chest was only darkness. She thought of the laughter shared in their sign language lessons, the warmth in Adrian's eyes when he spoke of his sister. But Vivian's smirk and the venom of those anonymous emails drowned it all. Smothering the fragile hope she had carried, she whispered to herself, "Clara Jensen, it's time to leave. If you don't, your heart will shatter before it even begins." The next morning, on the reception desk, only two things remained: her keycard and a single note. "Thank you for the opportunity. I resign, Clara Jensen." Clara Jensen never imagined that leaving behind a keycard and a short note could feel so heavy. The morning she walked away from Lowell Global, she moved through rain-slicked streets, her worn flats soaked through. Her heart torn between relief and ache. "At least I've escaped those stairs," she told herself. But deep down, another truth whispered, she had escaped Adrian Lowell. A week later, Clara arrived at a modest building in Brooklyn. A weathered wooden sign hung over the door. Community Bridge, a nonprofit supporting the deaf and decide. There were no gleaming interiors, only old furniture. Bulletin boards covered in flyers, and the sound of laughter echoing from the corner. A group of deaf children were practicing a song through sign language. "Hello, can I help you?" A tall, lean man in his 30s approached. His bright eyes and gentle smile instantly softened the space. "I'm Clara. I heard you were looking for volunteers who know sign language? I have some experience." He extended a hand. "Ethan Brooks. I'm the director here. Welcome." There was no suspicion in Ethan's eyes. No doubt, only a simple welcome. The very thing Clara had longed for. The first days at Community Bridge kept her too busy to think about the accusations that had driven her from Lowell Global. She taught children to sign organized files and worked with Ethan to plan fundraisers. One afternoon, as Clara helped an 8-year-old girl spell words with her hands, Ethan called out, "Careful with that one, Clara. She's a little rascal." Clara looked up to see him carrying a heavy box of files, his smile lighting up the room. She laughed, realizing it was the first time in weeks her chest didn't feel weighed down. Meanwhile, high above Manhattan, Adrian Lowell sat in his corner office, staring at the empty desk before him. Clara's keycard lay in his drawer, a relic of his failure to protect someone he had wanted so desperately to keep. Will's trusted aide entered. "Sir, the shareholders' meeting is about to start." Adrian nodded. Though his eyes lingered on a scrap of paper, Clara's hand-drawn sign language exercises, once scrawled for his lessons. Now the childish sketches mocked him like ghosts. "Are you all right, sir?" Will asked carefully. Adrian leaned back, his voice hoarse. "Do you know why I started the Inclusion Project? Because of your sister Elise, not only because of her. Because of someone who did what no one else in this building dared. She spoke to a deaf visitor as though he were simply another human being. And now she's gone because I couldn't protect her." Will said nothing. No words could soften what Adrian already knew. Back in Brooklyn, Clara quickly became the backbone of Community Bridge. Ethan entrusted her with planning their very first fundraising event the evening before. With everyone else gone, only she and Ethan stayed behind to hang banners. He handed her a bottle of water, his expression warm. "You know, Clara, some people volunteer here just to polish their resumes. But you stay because of your heart." Clara flushed. "I just want to do something that matters. At my old job, I couldn't." Ethan studied her as if he wanted to ask more, but only smiled instead. "Then let this place be your new beginning." Clara nodded softly. A new beginning, the words soothed her like a balm. Meanwhile, Adrian stood before the mirror in the company gym, his shirt damp with sweat. Over and over, his hands formed signs. "Good morning." "Thank you." "Nice to meet you." Without Clara to correct him, he stumbled, learning only from grainy videos. He made mistakes again and again, but instead of giving up, he pressed on, as if clinging to the memory of her. When Will entered and caught sight of him, he said nothing. But in that silent moment, he realized. Adrian Lowell, the cold CEO, who once treated emotions as a luxury, was changing. On the day of the Brooklyn fundraiser, Clara wore a simple blue dress as she stood on a small stage. She introduced the project music through hands for deaf children. Her eyes bright, her voice trembling yet full of passion. The audience erupted in applause. Ethan, watching from below, looked at her with quiet pride. Clara smiled, and for the first time, she believed she had found a place where she truly belonged, yet high in a Manhattan skyscraper. One man sat in a meeting, staring at the empty seat beside him. And though no one else could hear it, his heart whispered a name he could not forget: Clara Jensen. The Lowell Global Tower glowed like a fortress that never slept. Yet on the 50th floor, inside the boardroom, the air was heavy with tension. Adrian Lowell sat rigid at the head of the table, financial reports spread before him. His eyes skimmed over the numbers without absorbing a single one. They were nothing more than an excuse to avoid looking at the man across from him, his father. Richard Lowell, Richard, now in his 60s, was still tall and broad-shouldered. His silver-streaked hair was slicked back, his eyes cold and piercing, as if they could cut through steel. He slammed his pen down on the table, the sound cracking through the silence. "Adrian," he began, his tone firm and unyielding, "this waste of time ends now." "You mean the Inclusion Project?" Adrian asked without lifting his gaze. "Call it what it is, a cheap humanitarian stunt to cover up weak governance." Richard narrowed his eyes. "Do you really think bringing in a few deaf and disabled employees will reassure shareholders? They care about profits, not emotional theatrics." Adrian's fists tightened. In his mind, Clara's smile flickered her patient hands, guiding his through the clumsy shapes of sign language. The way she looked at people, seeing them as human beings, not as liabilities. "It's not a stunt," Adrian replied, his voice rough but steady. "It's a way to make this company better. And if you can't see that, then you've forgotten why we started in the first place." Richard let out a sharp laugh. "Why we started? Don't talk to me about beginnings. I built Lowell Global from nothing. Cold logic and discipline got us here, and you're letting emotions cloud your judgment." Outside, in the carpeted hallway, Clara froze. She hadn't meant to overhear. She had come to deliver sponsorship letters on Ethan's behalf, passing the 50th floor. But the door stood ajar, voices spilling out Richard's sharp, Adrian's defiant. Her feet refused to move. Something in her heart told her their argument was about her. Inside. The clash grew louder. "What are you afraid of?" Adrian demanded, meeting his father's gaze at last. "That a team of deaf employees will ruin Lowell Global's profit margins, or that your image of power will be threatened by compassion." Richard shot to his feet, both palms slamming the mahogany table. "You dare? Yes, I dare." Adrian's voice thundered. "For the first time in my life, I believe I'm doing what's right. I don't want this company remembered as a soulless money machine. I want it to be a place where anyone is valued for who they are." A thick silence pressed down. Richard's eyes flickered between fury and something else, helplessness. "Perhaps, when did you change, Adrian?" he asked slowly. "My son was never this weak." Adrian clenched his fists, drawing in a deep breath. Since the day Clara Jensen walked through those doors, her name rang out in the vast room. Richard's brows furrowed. "So that's it. A common girl, no pedigree, no status has driven my son to defy his own father." Adrian's jaw hardened. "Don't you dare call her that. Clara has more dignity than those who bow only to power." Out in the hallway, Clara felt her face flush, her heart pounding wildly. Her name spoken out loud. The sting of Richard's words, common girl, cut deep. But then Adrian's voice followed, fierce and unwavering, defending her with a pride that shook her to her core. Tears welled in her eyes. She swiped them away. But nothing could erase the guilt tightening in her chest. Her presence had ignited a war between father and son. Inside, Richard crossed his arms, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You're digging your own grave, Adrian. A CEO ruled by feelings doesn't deserve the seat he's in." "Then take the seat," Adrian shot back, each word heavy as stone. "I'd rather lose everything than lose myself." Richard stared at him for a long, hard moment before striding toward the door. Clara ducked into a shadowed corner just in time, her pulse hammering as Richard swept past, his cologne thick in the air. Inside, Adrian remained leaning over the table, his shoulders trembling slightly. He had no idea someone had heard it all. Clara turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. A storm of emotions churned inside her, pride at Adrian's defiance, pain at being dismissed, and guilt at being the cause of such a rift. That night, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Clara sat staring at unopened fundraising files. Adrian's voice echoed in her mind, standing tall for her, unflinching. Should she go back and face it, or disappear so he wouldn't have to pay the price of her existence? Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat alone in his dark office. His hand resting on the paper Clara had once scrawled with sign language notes. His whisper broke the silence, low and raw. "Clara, I won't let you disappear from my life again." Brooklyn nights carried a kind of fragile calm. The street outside Community Bridge lay quiet under the dim glow of street lamps, broken only by children's laughter spilling from a nearby apartment. Clara Jensen sat in the small office, a stack of fundraising files untouched before her, each time she closed her eyes. Richard Lowell's voice echoed, a common girl, with no pedigree, no standing, and right after. Adrian's voice, fierce and unyielding. Don't you dare call her that. She wondered if she was truly worth being the reason for a father and son's war. When the clock in the neighboring building struck 10, a soft knock startled her. She thought it might be Ethan returning for something he'd forgotten. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Adrian Lowell stood there. The same black suit, but his tie loosened, his eyes heavy as if he had just weathered a storm. That gaze met hers, and without a word, Clara felt her chest tighten. "Adrian, I needed to see you," he said, his voice low and raw, as though carried on the weight of too many unspoken thoughts. Clara stepped back, letting him in. The cramped room seemed too small for his tall frame, but he didn't care. "I heard everything," Clara blurted, her voice trembling. "Your argument with your father and you saying my name." Adrian was silent for a long beat before he nodded. "I don't regret it." Clara clenched her hands together. "But I feel guilty. I don't want to be the reason you're at odds with your father. You have an empire to protect, and I'm just ordinary." Adrian stepped closer, forcing her to look up at him. "Don't say that. Clara, from the day you walked into Lowell Global, I realized what the company had lost its humanity. You reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, it's strength." She turned away, afraid of the intensity in his eyes. "But if being with me makes you lose your family, your position—" "I've already said it," Adrian interrupted firmly. "I'd rather lose everything than lose myself. And losing you would mean losing myself." Clara stood frozen, her defenses crumbling beneath the weight of his words. For a long moment, only the ticking clock filled the room. Finally, Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You know, I once dreamed of a small but meaningful job. At Community Bridge, I feel useful. But every time I think I've moved on, I still see your eyes, as if I've never really let go." Adrian's lips curved into one of his rare, tender smiles. "Then don't let go. We can do this together. You hear, with the children, with those who need support. Me at Lowell Global, pushing for change. Two paths that may run apart, but meet at the same point. Real value." Clara shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You make it sound so simple. But do you know what it's like living under scrutiny, being belittled for where you come from, feeling that pain every day?" Adrian gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "I do. Because my whole life, I've been seen only through others' eyes, expectations, demands, cold judgments. They never saw me as Adrian, only as an heir, as a CEO, but you see me as a man." Her eyes lifted to his, and the sincerity there melted her. They sat together on the worn couch. Adrian loosened his tie, folding his arms as he exhaled. "My father won't stop. He wants me to follow the cold path he walked. But I can't. And I don't want you to carry that burden either." That's why Clara's voice faltered. "That's why you came here to give up?" "No." Adrian's answer was immediate, his eyes burning with resolve. "I came to tell you that I choose you no matter what lies ahead." Clara's heart hammered. She had never longed for grand declarations, but his words pierced deeper than any poetry. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," Adrian admitted softly. "But I know one thing for certain. In the chaos of everything else, you're the one who reminds me I'm human, and I won't lose that." That night, there were no kisses, no hurried touches. Instead, they sat side by side, piecing together fragments of their lives. Adrian spoke of his childhood trapped in expectations of Elise, the sister he had once failed to protect. Clara spoke of her grandmother who taught her sign language, of her loneliness after losing her family. Their stories wove together, dissolving the gap of power and status. As the clock neared midnight, Clara leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder, peace washing over her for the first time. "This," Adrian murmured, "this is the true beginning." Clara. She closed her eyes, whispering back to herself, "The beginning I've waited for so long by dawn." When Adrian left Brooklyn, the sky was lightening. He knew storms still lay ahead. Richard Lowell would not relent. But for the first time, Adrian felt strong enough to fight them. Because he no longer fought alone, and Clara, watching his figure disappear from the window, felt something new stir in her chest. Not fear, but hope that love itself could become the flame to guide them both. On a gray morning, just as Clara Jensen stepped into Community Bridge, Ethan Brooks hurried toward her, a color-printed newspaper clutched in his hand. "Clara, you need to see this." She took it, her eyes darting to the bold headline splashed across the front page. CEO Adrian Lowell linked to scandal with former receptionist. Beneath it was a grainy but unmistakable photo. Clara leaving the Lowell Global building late at night, bag in hand, while Adrian's shadowy figure lingered faintly in the doorway behind her. Her body went cold. "Oh God," she whispered. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. His voice was gentle, but laced with worry. "I know you're innocent, but the press doesn't care. They'll spin it, blow it up, turn it into their circus." Clara drew in a shaky breath. "Who would want to do this?" Ethan shook his head, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Could be someone inside Lowell Global. Big corporations aren't short of enemies waiting to strike." In Manhattan, Adrian Lowell slammed the paper onto his desk. His face was grim, his eyes darkened. Will, his aide, stood silently, barely daring to breathe. "Adrian, the story is everywhere, social media, news outlets. The shareholders want answers." Adrian stood still, jaw tight, then spoke in a voice like steel. "Find out who's behind this." This didn't appear out of thin air. Will hesitated. "Do you think it was Richard?" Adrian froze. His father had crossed many lines before, but to smear an innocent woman? He wasn't sure anymore. "Whoever it is," Adrian growled, "I won't let Clara be destroyed." That afternoon, Clara received a message asking her to meet at a quiet cafe. The sender, Richard Lowell. She hesitated for a long time before going. In the corner of the cafe, Richard sat waiting, poised like a king summoning a pawn. "Clara Jensen," he said as she sat down. "You've certainly attracted attention." Clara kept her voice steady. "If you asked me here just to repeat your insults, I'll leave now." Richard smirked. "Stronger than I expected. But don't be naive. The whole city thinks you're climbing your way up by using my son." The words cut deep, but Clara clenched her hands. "I don't need to prove myself to you. Adrian knows who I am. And Adrian?" Richard leaned in, his gaze sharp as ice. "Because of you, he could lose his position, lose the shareholders' trust. Can you bear that weight?" Clara's lips trembled into silence. Richard continued slowly, each word deliberate. "Walk away. That's the only way to protect him. If you stay, trust me, the media storm has only just begun." That evening, Adrian found her in Brooklyn. He stepped into the community center's common room where Clara was putting away chairs. Clara, say, she turned, eyes swollen from tears. You shouldn't be here. I had to come. You saw the news, didn't you? She nodded, clutching the back of a chair. They say I'm using you. And maybe they're right, Adrian. I've dragged you into this mess. Adrian moved closer, his voice firm. No, the one using anyone isn't you. You've only ever acted with honesty. I'm the one who failed to protect you. Clara shook her head, tears glistening. Your father met me. He said if I truly cared about you, I'd leave. Adrian froze. He said that. Clara bit her lip. I can't be the reason you lose everything. I don't belong in your world. Adrian reached for her hand, his eyes blazing with conviction. Clara, I don't need someone who belongs to my world. I need someone who sees me as Adrian, not as CEO. And that's you. Her tears spilled over. You don't understand. I'm afraid, Adrian. Afraid that one day the pressure will crush us. He tightened his grip, his voice rough. Then let it crush me first. I'd rather lose everything than lose you again. They stood in silence, the rain outside beginning to fall in soft, steady sheets. Masking the tears neither could hold back anymore. The next day, Adrian called an emergency press conference. Reporters flooded the grand lobby of Lowell Global. He stepped onto the podium, cameras flashing wildly. His voice, when he spoke, was unwavering. The stories circulating these past 2 days are distortions. Clara Jensen did not exploit me, nor did she seek advancement through personal ties. I was the one who asked her to join our inclusion project. Clara is the person who reminded me that the true value of a company isn't profit eyes how we treat people. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Adrian's gaze sharpened as he continued. If blame must be placed, place it on me. But do not insult a woman who has done nothing but live with sincerity and kindness. At first, a few hesitant claps. Then the applause grew, swelling until it filled the hall. The reporters who had come for scandal found themselves moved instead by something rare. Conviction in the far corner. Richard Lowell sat with arms crossed, eyes shadowed. But even he knew Adrian was no longer the obedient son who bowed to his will. That night, Clara sat in her small apartment, watching the press conference replay on her laptop. When Adrian looked straight into the camera and said, "Do not insult a woman who has done nothing but live with sincerity and kindness," her tears came fast and unstoppable. And in that moment, Clara realized maybe it was time to stop running. After the press conference, Lowell Global was in an uproar. The media split in two. Some praised Adrian Lowell as the CEO who dared to stand on the side of justice, while others mocked him as a man who let his heart rule his head. But whatever the headlines, one fact was undeniable for the first time in the corporation's history. A chief executive had publicly defended an ordinary employee from her small Brooklyn apartment. Clara Jensen followed it all with trembling hands and a heart that warmed despite itself. He had done what no one believed Adrian Lowell ever could. A week later, the fall fundraising gala at Community Bridge was underway. The room was packed. Businessmen, teachers, parents all gathered for the cause. Clara rushed between tables, too busy to think of anything else. But when she looked up, her heart stopped. Adrian stood at the entrance. No entourage, no flash of power, just a simple suit and a heavy box of sign language textbooks in his arms. He bowed politely to the volunteers, like any ordinary man lending a hand. Clara's chest ached with emotion. She hurried over. Ready to scold. You shouldn't be here, you're the press's favorite target right now. But before she could speak, Adrian leaned closer and whispered, I didn't come as a CEO. I came as Adrian, a man who wants to offer his hands. The sincerity in his eyes left her unable to refuse. That evening, when the event was over, the two sat together on the steps outside the center. The night was cool. But their shared breath seemed enough to warm the air. Clara fiddled with the bracelet handmade by the children at the center. "You know," she said softly, "today I felt happiness. Not because of the money raised, but because I saw those children laugh and believe their voices mattered." Adrian smiled faintly, and I felt happiness too. Not because I proved anything to shareholders, but because I saw you where you belong. Clara shook her head, sighing. "But we're still from two different worlds, Adrian. Your father, he'll never accept me." Adrian was silent for a moment, then clasped her hand firmly. "Then I'll stop living in his world. I want to build a new one with you." Her tears spilled over. For the first time, she didn't turn away. The very next day, Adrian convened a special board meeting. Everyone expected excuses. Instead, he began with calm conviction. Lowell Global will establish an Institute of Inclusive Communication, in direct partnership with community organizations like Community Bridge. The person spearheading this will be Clara Jensen. The room erupted in murmurs. Some shareholders objected, others watched in silence. At the end of the table, Richard Lowell sat rigid, his face carved from stone. Adrian pressed on. "We cannot reduce social responsibility to slogans. This will be a concrete step, proving that profit and humanity can exist together." After heated debate, the motion passed by a majority vote. Adrian exhaled. Slowly, he had laid the first stone of true change. That evening, he found Clara at the center, sorting files. He held a small box. "What's this?" she asked. He opened it. Inside lay a simple silver ring, engraved with the sign for always. "Clara Jensen," Adrian said. His voice unsteady, the rare crack in a man used to commanding empires. "I can't promise you a life free of gossip or battles. I can't promise extravagance. But I promise this: I will always stand beside you. Always." Clara's tears flowed as she smiled through them. "Do you know? I once thought I was just an ordinary girl. But with you, I feel seen. I feel heard." She extended her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes, Adrian. Not because you're a CEO, but because you dared to truly love me." Their wedding was nothing like the glittering banquets of Manhattan. It was a small garden behind Community Bridge, where deaf children formed a choir in sign language, and Ethan officiated when Adrian and Clara exchanged vows. The autumn breeze stirred gently, as if nature itself bore witness. "Do you realize," Clara whispered after their first kiss as husband and wife, "this all began with a deaf visitor wandering into Lowell Global." Adrian smiled. "And with a girl who dared to stand up and sign, 'Hello, may I help you?'" They laughed through their tears. That simple ceremony was the most lavish gift either could imagine. The freedom to choose. The freedom to love. Months later, the Institute of Inclusive Communication opened its doors. Clara became its first director, leading a young, passionate team. Adrian was both her partner and her greatest supporter. Every morning as she walked into the building, Clara no longer felt like she didn't belong. Around her were colleagues, children laughing with their hands. And Adrian, not just a CEO, but a man willing to defy the world to protect her. And sometimes, when she passed through the gleaming lobby of Lowell Global, Clara remembered the day she stumbled headlong through the revolving door. But now, the memory only made her smile. Because sometimes, the clumsiest fall is the very first step toward a love that lasts forever. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing, it slips in quietly. Through mistakes, stumbles, and the courage to stand up for someone who feels unseen. Adrian and Clara's journey reminds us that dignity, kindness, and true love can bridge even the widest worlds apart. Thank you for listening to this story with Snail. Story, if it touched your heart. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your support is what keeps us bringing more slow, healing love stories to life.